Live. Hello, Jazz. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm positive because the days are getting longer, and that makes me happy. I love the sun and the longer days. So
Oh my goodness. Yes, definitely. I agree with that. Getting up when it's dark, then it getting dark halfway through the afternoon, it's just no
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Hence, I love your sweater because it feels like sunshine.
Yes, thank you.
You're
I'm very much wrapped up. I'm like,
yeah. So hello and thank you for coming here. Thank you for being here with us today. I appreciate you very much for taking your own time to coming here and talking with us.
yeah, you're so welcome. It's an absolute pleasure when you reached out. And the things that we're going to talk about are some of my favorite topics. So it would always make time.
I can't wait. So can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Yeah, so my name is Jaz Broughton. I am a self-confessed ambitious person. I am a career coach. I'm also a community manager, so I do have one of those multi-hyphenate careers, but I'm just really passionate about people and really inspiring them and empowering them to embrace their ambition and go for the things that they want, not only in their careers but in their lives. So that's the work that I do as a coach through one-to-one coaching, group programs, and workshops.
I love it, and I've read on your website, which I will now bring to the screen, is
Mhm.
your mission, which
Yeah.
really touched my heart, and it was like to empower 10,000 ambitious individuals to create fulfilling, phenomenal, and unlimited careers.
Hmm.
This word "unlimited,"
Yeah.
I got chills now as I was reciting it. I've never experienced I've never thought about it in that way
Mm.
before that, but technically it's the truth. Like careers are unlimited. I actually think that everything in our life is unlimited, like it's infinite versus finite. So
Yeah.
having this articulated in that way, like swept me off my feet.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad you connected with it. I think it was a thing for me where I've always been focused on impact, right? And
Mm,
the more and more I do the work that I do, the more I realize how we quite often absorb limits on our careers. So
mm,
we think we can't do certain things. I know through the journey that I've experienced and lived that if you had told me I would be in this position doing this day to day 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you, right? Because I
yeah,
had those limits. I was studying a degree, which meant that, you've got one of five outcomes, right? And my degree was hospitality. So it's like, very, very linear. And
mm,
then also separately, when I talk about unlimited and I talk about even limitless, which is kind of the title of my podcast, which is the Limitless Career Podcast. As I began my work as a coach, I started to realize all the ways that we impose limits emotionally, spiritually, like we impose limits on ourselves,
yeah,
right? We get to this space where we tell ourselves that we can't do it. And quite often that can happen in the face of having a bunch of cheerleaders saying, yes, you can, having folks advocate for you, having opportunities come up and you say no, and you put the limit there, even though the invitation is open and it's ready for you, right? And
yeah.
that really in a lot of ways it broke my heart because it made me realize how easy it is for us to hold ourselves back, to self-sabotage and do all these things quite unintentionally, right?
Mm,
Because a lot of it can stem from that space of self-protection and still wanting safety, but the world that
yeah,
we live in, the careers, modern careers, that safety stuff, like you have to get used to a certain level of uncertainty. You have to get used to a certain level of adventure, even if you really want that stability and you want that linear journey.
yeah,
It's a new way of being. And sometimes we within ourselves don't know how to compute that because even from childhood, we're
yeah,
taught to think in linear ways. You
yeah,
do preschool, you do school, you do secondary school, you do college,
yeah,
you go in the straight line.
yeah,
Anyone who doesn't go into the straight line, right? When you think about moving from one stage to another, when somebody goes, oh, my friend's taking a gap year, it's like, oh, that's different.
Yeah.
Hmm. Why are they doing that? And our
Yeah.
attitudes to it have shifted a lot now. But again, it's like, oh, that person's going against the norm. Whereas
Mhm.
I think in the future, there won't be a norm. The only norm will be going for what you want.
Yeah. I'm so excited that you brought up the word linear because I was just speaking to one of my very close friends this morning about that exact kind of way of that exact logic because she was like we were talking about our very own different pathways and things we want in life. Like I'm very like I jump from thing to thing, from industry to industry, medium to medium, because I'm curious in a lot of like for a lot of things, and I just follow my curiosity and go from there. But um, I know even how much I struggle with that because yeah, it doesn't fit with the imposed linearity of life. And then kind of my message was, or rather like my thought this morning was, the only thing that's linear in life is time, and even time is a made up concept because one day some human made up the concept of 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. So like for me it was like kind of that realization that happened during that talk of how much kind of added stress is completely unnecessary because it has been added
Mm,
intentionally or not intentionally upon ourselves by us or by the rest of the society. But it's like I feel like that the more and more I question everything and the more I have conversations with people such as yourself, I realize just how almost um, wrong I have been
mm,
thinking, or I don't want to say living, but like it was
mm,
my life was very kind of I will describe my life as resistance because like
mm,
I was always yearning for something different, for something more that didn't quite fit in that linearity of what I was supposed to be doing in that specific moment of my life, right? So now kind of stripping all of that away, I feel that that freedom of thought brought me not only more confidence but more creativity as well in my life because I don't overwhelm with stuff as much as I did before.
Oh my
Oh my
goodness.
goodness.
And
And
releasing
release
the
the
should.
should.
Release
Mm.
as soon as you said supposed to, it's such a powerful thing. And, it just goes to show how easily we're socialized into these things, right? You didn't wake up and decide that you want to resist against your very being. It just, there was this map, and everything in you was just like, this map doesn't necessarily work for me. So I have to find a way to break free from it, right?
Yeah,
But the shoulds, it's such a powerful way of limiting ourselves without even realizing it. Because if we think about any should in life, so like I got like half a degree. I got a postgraduate certificate. It was meant to be a master's. But I was like, I had already moved away from the industry. So I was studying real estate.
hmm,
I could be a surveyor. And that was my last that was my industry before moving into tech, right? And the should is Jazz, you should force yourself to do this dissertation so that you can get the masters. Whereas I had already moved on,
yeah,
right? I had
yeah,
established a successful career in another industry that did not need that degree.
yeah,
I had also already paid for it out of pocket, like so that I don't like there's no discounts for submitting your dissertation.
yeah,
And I was also at that space as well, launching my business, which was more close to like what I wanted to do. But
yeah,
all the shoulds, and I know people that live in the should and took the should decision to say, I started a master's, I should finish a master's. I sent an email to administration and said, what happens if I stop now and I don't do a dissertation? They
yeah,
said, "And it means that you graduate with a postgraduate certificate in real estate." I said, that's fine.
yeah, yeah.
That's fine.
Love that.
Because when you ask, who are these shoulds? None of these shoulds were paying for my degree. I was.
Mm,
No, none of these shoulds were gonna sit down and write that dissertation. I was. None of
mm,
these shoulds were gonna explain to myself at the end of that year the sacrifices that I would have had to make to focus on making it work. None
Yeah.
of the shoulds would have compensated for the stress that I would have felt forcing myself physically to do something that I don't want to do. Like, if anybody here is listening and they've studied at higher education level, you could love your topic, your subject, your you could love everything about it, and there's still a huge uphill battle to motivate yourself to write another 2,000 words, to read another 10,000 pages, to
Mm.
add another 5 citations, right? So when I weighed it up, I was like, my path is the path that I choose, because regardless of which path I choose, I'm alone in that journey.
Yeah.
Let me make sure that I don't have regrets on it, and let me make sure that when I look at my career, or I look at this phase, or I look at this year, I know why everything is happening, and not one response, not one answer is down to what I think other people think,
Hmm.
or what I've been socialized to think, right? Because when we talk about what we're socialized into, that's not necessarily having a human being in front of you going, you should finish your degree.
Yeah.
It's just when you look around and it's like everyone else seems to finish their degrees.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we grow up and we realize that no,
Yeah.
everybody doesn't finish their degrees. Everybody doesn't go to uni. Like, we've
Yeah.
got paths.
Yeah. I in case I didn't know that you were that your academia journey was towards becoming a surveyor. I was studying geodesy slash surveying for my bachelor's degree also.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
I've had I had a similar thought process, but a kind of a different journey.
Mm,
Um, because when I was I think I was around 21, 22 perhaps, I didn't have the courage to be
mm,
like, I'm done. Like I was at that moment, like after having a lot of papers written and published and some awards and like a really nice GPA, I was still
mm,
waking up every morning with like a pit in my stomach, almost like nauseous every single morning because I have to go to class,
mm,
because of the overall experience of studying on that specific faculty. And I knew for even then for like a long time that it doesn't sit well with me anymore. Like I felt like it's eating me up from the inside. But I
yeah.
was so encompassed with that idea that I will be a failure if I give up.
Mm.
And so I kept on pushing. And then it kept on eating me. And like I was so depressed by the time that the universe, like I ended up being um, switching my majors at
Yeah.
like in the like very close to the end. I had like I think two exams and then the final exam for my bachelor's. I ended up switching majors because I just couldn't
Mm,
anymore. I just couldn't. And with my mom, who was a dean of another university then, and
mm.
everyone in my family being highly educated, like even my grandma went to university.
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah,
those shoulds are strong. They're
yeah. So
academic.
yeah, and every like for me to be able kind of to like even me switching majors and then I am late for my masters because there is such a thing as being late to a degree in my culture. um it brought a lot of negative emotions for me at that time because I was, like, it was an internal struggle where I knew that doesn't sit well with me, but I didn't have the courage, like you did, to be like,
Mm,
I just don't care what everyone else around me thinks. I'm just focusing on what I know is good for me. And then
yeah.
kind of building that muscle is what what I'm learning now is so beneficial because at the end of the day, what stuck with me when you said at the end of the day you're alone.
Mm,
There's no one else to do that work for you. And by definition, now kind of having it as clear as day, putting it that way, It means that literally you shouldn't care about what anyone else thinks because they won't be there for you. Sometimes even not to support you or do your work. You're alone and you're the one that needs to carry that decision for the rest of your life.
100%. And I think, and this is not to say that there aren't people that, that your family don't care, because they do. But the reality is, the consequences of a decision that doesn't feel true for you, that is too heavy for you to carry, gives them the outcome that they don't want, right?
Mm, yeah,
They don't want you to be in a tough space with your mental health, with your well-being, right? They don't want you to feel disconnected from your everyday life and all of those things that can happen when you
yeah.
find yourself in a space that is just, it's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming. It's one thing after the other, and I just mustered up the courage and the motivation to submit that, and then now there's another thing, and I
Yeah.
need to have a meeting, I need to change the topic, I need to find a way for me to complete this, right? Because even when I think about being in that space of things being tough, you get to this point mentally, and I'm a very glass half full person. Even before I became a coach, that was just my default. But there's sometimes things that weigh on you so heavy that you're at this space where it's like, I just need to pass it. Like,
Mm,
I'm not even entertaining getting a distinction and merit or like first class. No, I just need to pass it so that I don't have to retake it, because that's all I've got in my chamber. That's all I've got in me to
yeah,
give to this thing right now. Or my aim is to just submit it on time, right?
yeah.
And that's it. And even when we're getting to those spaces, it can come with a lot of guilt. It can come with a lot of, what do you mean? It can feel like we're judging ourselves, because it can feel like we're planning to fail. But no, we're actually, like, thriving is too far. When you're in the thrive space, like on this side of the screen, I love the fact that we're on screen. When you're in the thrive space, you're like, I'm going to knock it out of the park. I'm going to do it on a subject that I love. I'm
Yeah.
going to put expertise in this. I'm going to sit down with my supervisor every week and really fine tune. That's the space of thriving. As things get heavier and heavier and less aligned, you go to this place of survival. And survival is the person saying, I just need to submit on time. I
Mm,
just need to get a good enough grade that I don't need to retake, or it doesn't drag down the other things, right? You start to plan for self-defense. I remember even doing this in my university experience. And for me, I experienced depression and anxiety while I was at uni. Again, so I mean it when I say, you're doing it by myself. Like, I know my family love me. I know my mom wanted to support me and my friends and stuff like that. But it was me in my room struggling to get out of bed. So
yeah.
go to that space where I remember creating a spreadsheet and putting in my marks so far, and like figuring out, okay, if I get this grade in this assignment and then that exam at that, I can pass with this grade. Phew.
Yeah.
Again, some people are like, you shouldn't you be aiming for the best? Shouldn't you
Mm,
be aiming for the top? And that is so tough. And like, I say this to say, like, we have to give ourselves grace because we experience things differently. And
yeah.
for me, when I was doing that, I was working 3 jobs. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I know you mean well, but I
Yeah.
literally don't have the physical or the mental capacity to knock every single assignment out of the park at this
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
because I need to pay rent and
Yeah.
I need to just try and make it through.
Yeah. Oh, I empathize so much with everything that you've said. I feel um, a lot of your experiences have been my experiences to a high degree as well. And I remember how, not even judgmental. What's the word? It's worse than judgmental towards myself. Of
Like
not,
critical.
yeah, like like extremely self-critical, and to the point where I was, like felt like I was disappointing and betraying myself to a degree because I couldn't be perfect in everything all the time.
Mm,
People, it's not that it's not so necessarily that people expect a lot from me. Is that
yeah.
I expect even more from me, and then at times when I can't deliver that, even this past week, for example. So I'm in my last semester of my master's program, where I have
Mm,
to write my master's thesis. I have always been procrastinating on everything until the very last minute or the very last hour, because
I
every
relate.
time, yeah, because and this is just something that I kind of voiced over and discovered, kind of articulated for myself in the last like 10 days, speaking it out with friends is and therapists. The reason why I do that is because every time I start something,
Mm,
I hate starting because I know when I start I'm not good at it and I don't like not being good at things. Then the second thing is I have to go through the torture of questioning and doubting myself only once.
mm,
But now I have a thesis project, which is a big project, which I can't do in 2 days. Technically, I would, but the process is set up in that way that I need to meet with my supervisor every week or every other week at
yeah.
like minimum. And for the past 2 weeks, I didn't do anything because I was like, I can't get myself to start because I'm not mentally ready to go through the torture of experiencing that every single week when I'm starting all over again every single time.
Yeah.
And it's like that that heaviness was like really it was making me feel depressive and really anxious. And then it's like it's that vicious cycle of like literally I met with my supervisor. I almost cried in front of him because I was like, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I just can't seem to start.
Yeah.
It was so heavy, and I oh, it's like love that I'm able to talk through this whilst I'm in this, like whilst I'm experiencing that, because I think that in a lot of situations we often talk about the before and after, and then we skip this messy middle.
We skip it. We skip it entirely.
Yeah.
It's so important. And I relate 100% to what you're saying. And like, I've even felt that way in work. And just hearing you have that self awareness around how you get things done is so so important, and it's actually something that I'm doing a lot of work around this year. I'm actually creating a program around finding a way of being in your career that doesn't come with that self blame, the self sabotage, the even as you were speaking, I related to this whole feeling of being in this messy middle and saying to yourself, this is not me.
Yeah.
Right? I am the person that can just do stuff and I did it, and starting to
Yeah.
compare yourself to this like magical version of yourself, or for some of us, the childhood version of yourself, right? And a lot of this
Mm,
leads into the area of imposter syndrome where like if you've grown up finding certain things easy, the minute you find it's guilt like difficult, it's like, oh,
yeah.
and it comes with this shame. So
Yeah.
I bet you even to reach out to your lecturer, even reaching out to your supervisor to say I haven't got an update is like I should tell them I haven't done it. I should tell them I'm behind, but I can't. How can I tell them I'm behind, right? And in many ways, and this is what I say for anybody who's experiencing imposter syndrome in the way that I'm describing it, right? It can force you to hide, but
Mm,
getting over that and actually stopping hiding can be helpful.
yeah.
And having that conversation with your supervisor could end up being helpful
Yeah.
because it can help you get out of your head. But when
Yeah.
you're in that space where you're experiencing that imposter syndrome, that is the worst, that's the last thing you feel intuitively to do, which is to come clean and be vulnerable. But the minute that you do that, the shame gets lifted because you're
Yeah.
no longer in this space
Yeah.
when you're thinking, I'm worried about what they think, because you're in
Mm,
the space where you know what they think. They're looking you in the eye and going, don't worry. Let's see how much time we've got left. Talk me through what you wanted to write. Talk me through the part where you're getting stuck and you get that support. And I've had that experience both in my workplace, being vulnerable with my team, with my managers, but
mm,
also like separate to that in terms of the imposter experience, but just in general, how we operate and navigate in our careers, whether it is in a space of academia, so you're studying, or you're new in your career, or you're growing in your career. It's so important for us to establish a way of being
yeah.
in our careers, right? And I will say this, hands held high as a career coach, there's a lot of focus on the doing. right? And I
Mhm.
can do it. I can do it all day. I could work with you on productivity, planning, vision boarding. We could do all that fun stuff. But that is going to feel so sticky if you haven't come to terms with your way of being.
Mhm.
So I nodded. I loved it when you were just like, I procrastinate, I do things last minute. In my head, I was like, there's certain things that I do last minute and I've stopped blaming myself for it. And it is so freeing for me to say, I'm going to start this in the last week and I'm going to complete it in the last week, right?
Yeah.
And to some
Mhm.
people, that's not how you're meant to do stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently, everybody's meant to like take a big project and do a little bit every week. That is demotivating for me. There are very few things that can work like that, okay? There are like, I'm creating a program which teaches people how to create their way of being in their career. That's a long-term project, but it I do it in short bursts. So I'll do a whole module on one day, record, create, curate, research, right?
Yeah.
I work in this way because I know it works for me and it still gets the job done. So I refuse to be guilty about it. In fact, I'm quite open about it. My managers know, like, if you work with me, I will tell you how I'm motivated. I will also tell you my blind spots, right? I will
Mhm.
tell you that I'm so full of ideation that sometimes I can take on too many stuff and not complete it.
Yeah.
Then I have that conversation
Yeah.
again, and I build into my way of being that if I feel that I might not get to the space where I complete something, I ask for help.
Mm.
So I'll collaborate with somebody on the idea, and I'll collaborate with somebody whose way of working is completion. They don't really care about the beginning. They love the completion. They love the quality assessment. They love testing. They love iterating, right? And
Yeah.
when we come together, it works. But none of us are feeling the weight of shame. None of us are feeling the weight of any of these shoulds because we're existing in the way that is natural for us to exist, so much so that the way that you operate in your career, in your life, becomes a strength in and of itself. And so you can lift this way of working to different projects, different teams, different industries, even in your personal life, right? If
Yeah.
you're doing the party planning, like if I'm doing party planning, I need to have some people who love to do the finish. They love to do the wrap up. They love to do the conclusion, right? And we're
Yeah.
still getting it done. And we're able to just be in that zone. So like it's something that it was both delightful for me to hear that because I'm like, that's me too.
Yeah.
But also I want to encourage everyone who's listening that like try and get yourself to a space where you understand where that comes from.
Mm.
Is it a trauma response? Or is it something that is like is the discomfort that you're feeling the resistance, where you're
Mm.
resisting against your own nature? Figure
Yeah.
that out and then see if you can get yourself to a space where there's just less shame and it doesn't feel as heavy. We need to be light. You cannot be limitless when you're just like, I'm going to apologize for everything I am and everything I do and everything I didn't do.
Yeah.
You don't want that version of you showing up in the world, right? So,
Oh, yeah. 100%. Ah, I already feel better. I mean, like you said, not sorry. The part of me on yesterday was Wednesday. Yesterday morning when I spoke with my supervisor, as you say, like I already felt lighter because now I wasn't. It wasn't all now only a problem in my head. I voiced it out loud. I got understanding and compassion towards me, and I felt safe and supported. So I knew it wasn't such a big of a problem as it seemed in my own head. And
mhm,
now, even now, kind of saying it for the second time out loud with you, I feel in a lack of a better word, normal, as in it in my own mind. I have built it as such a negative thing
mm,
to be feeling and going through and living, even though on a rational level, I know that's bullshit. I know, but
yeah,
like there's just like such, it feels like at that point of time, it feels like a meta level of thoughts that arise where I
mm,
just can't bring myself be rational and embody everything that I believe in.
yeah,
it feels like a hostile takeover inside of my own brain, and I
Yeah.
can't help myself. And then with these um, conversations, or when I write and then I publish stuff, is how I process.
Mm.
So that's why I love so much speaking with other people and knowing that anyone listening or reading that's going through a similar thing can kind of appropriate the learnings and the story in their for their own situation and be like, okay, I feel lighter now as well.
That's why we have to talk about the messy middle.
Yeah.
Because so many of these things, so like I talk about lifting the limits of your career, right? One of the limits that we've already touched on is imposter syndrome. One of the things that it does is exactly what you describe. It short circuits the system. Like I watch a lot of Marvel films. It's like when you're in the superhero film and like the baddie overtakes the body of a good person and then starts to use them to do bad things.
Mm,
Okay. Insert whichever film that you want. I think it's in a couple cartoons as well. But you're just like, what is this spell that has been cast over my friend? Why are you looking at me like that? Why are you pointing your arrow at me? Like, what's going on? But
yeah.
they're under a hostile takeover. And what happens when that happens for us with experiences like imposter syndrome is the isolation. The isolation is what happens, right? So the experience tells you that you are unusual, you are weird for feeling this way, and nobody else could ever possibly understand because everybody else is logical and you're not. So, whatever's going on with you, you have to just handle it yourself. Again, this thought path starts to become a thing that stops you from reaching out for help and lifting the spell, which is literally just going, look, I'm stuck, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the example of the people that we could go to and say we're stuck to. They've seen other people be stuck. They've been stuck themselves,
Mm,
right? But
yeah.
they're not gonna share that unless they feel it's helpful or unless we give them that space or that it's open. So it's
Yeah.
so important for us to talk about the messy middle, and it's so important for us to identify, right? As you said, you process in that writing. That's why a lot of people are like, get a journaling practice, have a friend, have a coach, have a therapist, like have that space where you can break the spell yourself because
Hmm.
you're breaking it through that self awareness. Because especially when you're in it, it's hard to see what you're actually in, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's a phrase, you can't see the label from inside the jar. You literally can't see the label from inside the jar. And that's why a lot of the work that I do with folks around imposter syndrome, especially other stuff too, is let's focus on identifying when it's happening.
Mm,
Because once you identify that that is the thing that's happening, you can make a different choice.
yeah.
Whereas if you're just rolling through it and not trying to get out of the jar, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be hard to know what to do, how to find a solution, who to talk to, because you don't feel it happening. Remember, you're under the spell. It's
Yeah.
been short-circuited and you don't know. So it's that sort of element of asking yourself questions like, how long have I been feeling this way? What are the thoughts? Because the thoughts are connected to your beliefs. Your thoughts will dictate what you then go ahead and do or you don't do, right? If I'm scared, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to say it. If I'm
Mm,
feeling shame, I'm not going to confess it. If I'm not feeling safe, I'm not going to go into that space of vulnerability, right? So it's recognizing how these things are interlinked, but you can question this. You can question how you're feeling and answer that question honestly. You can grab a post it and write down, what are my thoughts right now?
mm,
Worried about deadline, scared nobody understands, stressed out about bills, worried about, upcoming review or whatever it may be. And you can look at that and go, whoa, this is what's going on in my brain, which is why my shoulders are up here. I can't sleep. I'm not really eating properly. Right. And you can
yeah.
start unraveling it through getting that space of self awareness. And this is not me, like, I'm not very good at journaling regularly as a practice, but I vent, I release,
Yeah.
I have coaching, all of that stuff so that
Yeah.
I don't stay in that space too long. For
Yeah.
some of us, we've been in that space for the whole of January and looked up and gone, oh my gosh. Even to the point where you talk to friends and they're like, I was just resting. And you're just like, I wasn't resting. I was trying to do stuff, but I was stuck.
Okay. Yeah. Mm, yeah.
But I'm going to tell you I was resting too, because my brain is sitting here at this lunch going, I was stuck. I was stuck. Like, what you were doing sounds nice. I was trying to be a productive individual and I
Yeah.
was scared.
Yeah. It didn't quite work out the way I wanted
And
it
it's like
to.
what you said. having a conversation with someone else can help you either hold up the mirror to you or give you that space of reflection of, can I relate to that? Do I relate to that? Do I remember what it feels like with that? Like
Yeah,
breaking out again, it's all just breaking out the spell.
yeah. And when it comes to breaking out the spell, and one thing that a lot that you mentioned earlier is being vulnerable in your workplace, like being vulnerable with your managers, with your team. I'm in a similar place where like I'm building a team of my own, but I'm also working for clients. And
Yeah.
my default is saying how I feel. And sometimes my client, I don't feel like I'm doing enough, which feels like for others, it feels like I'm shooting myself in the foot because you never confess to your clients that you feel like you're not doing enough.
Mm,
Um, but for me, I know that it's not coming from a rational thing that I am not doing, like I'm doing more than enough. It's just that I'm feeling like I'm not doing enough. And I know that the people I work with understand how my brain works, and they're not like I feel like I can easily almost like confide in them
mm.
about how I'm feeling. But regardless, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, um, to I- to what extent is vulnerability allowed, needed, words something along those lines in the workplace. So that because I know that on the one hand there will possibly always be some kind of people that will take advantage over your own vulnerability, but on the other side, I personally feel it can most often, like more often than not, elevate the relationship and provide more trust.
Yeah. We're humans. We're humans. And I think it's definitely in a case by case basis because I've definitely worked in environments where I didn't feel safe being vulnerable. And I was maybe vulnerable to people who were in other departments that I considered friends,
Mm,
um, and things like that, as opposed to my direct manager, because there was a disconnect there. Like, let's be honest, sometimes there is a disconnect.
yeah.
Only you know where that relationship kind of is. Vulnerability, in terms of like dictionary definition, is at risk of being hurt. So it's always going to come with that inbuilt risk.
Yeah.
However, it's something that helps us build connections in a way that is so very fruitful, right? When we talk about, like, I'll take an example. I remember watching an interview with a creative called Issa Rae, and she was sitting down with P Diddy, also known as Puff Daddy, depending on how old you are. Okay, and somebody in the audience said, "Hey, like, I want to know if you'd be open to me shadowing you for the day because I know what you've done. Like, I know the achievements, I know the moves you've made, but I want to know how you think, right?" And Diddy was just like, yeah, reach out to such and such who's in the back of the room. We can hook that up for the day. You can come to HQ and we can just vibe for the day. Right. And that for me was something where I was like, I want us to do more of that in our workplaces.
Mm,
Because when I think about the work that I do, so as a coach, I have two people supporting me. I have an operations manager and I have a marketing manager. We work together so well because we know how we think. So even for me, they know that I'm like an ideas person. They know I'm a morning person. They know that I'm always trying to do something different, but they also know that I've got that internal struggle with overcomplicating things. So that means, like in the case of like marketing manager is able to come up and go, that all sounds great, but isn't that what you said you were trying to get away from last year?
mm,
And in between. So in that sense, she was able to hold me accountable. She was also able to save herself running off to do work for something that I changed my mind on, right? But in that sense, she could have quite easily gone, "Oh my gosh, Jazz is a mess. Like she's got way too many ideas, da 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 da." Like, right? Okay, she could have been judgmental, she could have been critical, but she realized actually it's for the greater good of both of us for her to return my vulnerability with support, right? With support, with accountability, with that mirror to say, hey, Jazz, you're super duper creative. Don't worry, we will work together to condense this down, right? I've had the same with clients who I've done private work for. I've created programs, right? I've created programs and they've been able to say, like, this was the outcome of the work. But because they know I'm an ideas person, they'll give me that space to say, right, okay, so next time let's iterate on this. And
Mm.
it's not a thing of, oh, this she seems very creative. Maybe we just need the proposal in words. We don't want to have a call, like that sort of thing. Like you show up as you, and you can come with that vulnerability and let people give you back that energy or not. Now, to a certain extent, we're emotional, intelligent beings. So you know when you start the sentence if somebody's like, oh, and sometimes that can mean that they're not in the headspace to take that all in right now,
Yeah.
but I think it's very, very important. So the example that I use with my marketing manager and myself, being able to have that within your team. So whether like I work in tech, we're super collaborative. We're collaborative internationally. It's so important for us to understand how we think, so we can anticipate each other's needs. We can
Mm.
understand what it means. Like what does one colleague need to feel safe? For some of them, they need to have it written down, right? There are
Yeah.
some colleagues who love that we save the recording somewhere and somebody took the notes for me. Amazing. That makes me feel included and like I can contribute. Whereas there's other people who are like, if you hide it in a document, I won't find it. For me, what I need is for you to like give me that real-time brainstorm.
Mm.
And that's why it's so important to sometimes look at things like your communication styles. I talk to think. To some people, that can make it seem like my ideas are the best. No, that's just how I process. So if you know that as a colleague, you know that if you want my buy-in on a project or something like that, you could send me an email with a document of like, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? And I'll comment back, don't get me wrong. But the way for you to get the best out of me is give me 15 minutes for me to just go off on one. Like
Yeah.
we jump on a call, you talk through it, and I'm like, I'm thinking this. Have you thought about this? And you've harvested the best out of me in that open way. And again, somebody might feel like that's super messy or whatever it is, but it's about being comfortable with who you are, showing up and understanding that if we give each other that space, we
Yeah.
continue to build that safe space, it only makes us more collaborative. Going back to your example of working with a client and being like, oh, I feel like I do too much. And actually, this is something I'm writing a blog post on literally right now because this keeps happening. I speak to entrepreneurs and they're like, I keep over delivering, right? And these are the same entrepreneurs that are like, I should also raise my rates. And I'm like, right. So I need you to build in your customer experience things that are helpful to you. And that can look like providing a monthly update on this is what I did and these were the results. To the client, that's amazing because they can see, wow, value for money. This is what I'm getting. But for you, it
Mm.
can be that mental process of, I did too much this month. Let me scale it back a little bit. Or actually, what I did, which didn't feel like enough in the moment, I was freaking out. I was tempted to do like another 6 things on the
Yeah.
project. Actually, these 3 things got amazing results. So maybe I just need to double down. Maybe it is enough, right? And then
Mm.
again, we can have a conversation. We're not going to define ourselves by our work, but we have to unpick that when we say, is it enough? Is it a space where we're not believing that we are enough, that your skill level is enough, that your competency is enough, that the client chose to work with you? We do not force people to work with us. We put
Yeah.
out the invitation, they make a choice. That's why I love it when I get on calls with people and they're like, you're the third coach I'm having a call with this week. Yes, I want you to choose me. Like, right? And I want to have that data point to know in those moments where I may have a wobble to go, oh, maybe I'm not the coach for them. You
Yeah.
chose me. And that becomes part of my evidence bank, right? And to
Yeah.
some people, that looks like the boring, please sign the scope of works. Seems super formal, but that formal, boring document is what you can go back to go, I am doing enough. This is the scope of works that they signed. This is what they said they wanted. If they want more, we can have that conversation at the end of this contract or this engagement. But I'm not
Yeah.
going to let myself over
Yeah.
give and then get
Yeah.
into the space of regret or just keep on over giving because it makes me feel competent and comfortable when really I need to do the inner work to feel comfortable and competent in myself with where I
Yeah.
am now and trust what's happening.
Mm.
Amazing things are happening. Trust that it's happening. Trust that it's not a fluke. Trust that they didn't fall into your inbox by accident. Trust them when they say, we saw the work that you did over here and we loved it, right?
Yeah.
Trust that and stand in that and like feel that wholeheartedly so that you believe it, like it's added to your belief bank. And in that sense, you have to have your confidence, your sense of worthiness has to come from you. So anything
Hmm.
anyone else says or any feedback that you get, it's an addition, right? It's an additional piece of insight,
Yeah.
but it's always going to be an additional piece of insight to your core, not
Yeah.
you're like swapping out your core beliefs based on like people's opinions and testimonials or responses or the clicks or the likes or the comments. We can't live life like that.
Yeah.
Went off on one. I'm sorry, but
No,
I'm
no,
just
no.
you
I
are not.
I was just thinking how I wish that I had, like a toy microphone that I could just drop. Because this was, like I felt like I'm being taken down like for a very like for a roller coaster ride that ends at like it ends differently for everyone based on what our kind of fears and thoughts about everything you just said are.
Yeah.
First, like I think like we can have like groups of people kind of yeah grouping together at the same exit because sometimes the problems are very very similar, and it, I I'm constantly learning the lesson how every time I feel lonely and isolated my own experience, I'm not, because there are so many people who are going and feeling the same feelings and emotions and going through this same or similar situations, with the same or similar thoughts that are just yeah kind of that we need to arrive to that moment. And what we discussed earlier, it's the doing versus being, almost like we need to figure out our being, because I think once we fully accept that, then the doing is it's almost like not important because the being shines through and everything comes through the being. The doing almost like fixes itself up. For a long while I was trying to control what I was doing because I thought that's going to help me figure out who am I being.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I find my
yeah,
being. I'm confident when I get the right to do this. When I get the right to do this, I will be amazing.
yeah.
That's giving a lot of power to these tools.
Yeah, and like it's the just now, like as I was describing it, I thought of the like those Simon Sinek circles of
Mm-hmm. Why?
what how why is it.
Mm,
And then like I was going from the outside trying to figure out the inside instead of starting from the inside from my being, and then the doing kind of just like presents itself. And I think a big part for that is how, let's say, my one of my biggest struggles, or maybe even the biggest struggle I had in my life, was um, realizing that I don't have to have a niche or a special or something that to describe myself with like one single word or two words at maximum, because like I'm a generalist. Like, I have done such I worked in such different industries,
mm,
a plethora of different jobs, that from the outside it looks like she has no idea what she wants to do with her life. Like it's
yeah.
unconnected, whereas for me it's everything makes sense in its own way, because I'm trusting that what I'm building, I'm trusting my curiosity and how it's guiding me, that when I look back it will all make sense. But still, for like until I think a year and a half ago, I was predominantly preoccupied with how do I introduce myself? What, like, not who am I, but what am I?
Elevator pitch.
Yeah, and
Who do you help? Who are you
yeah,
for? Oh,
and yeah, I really struggle with that because it expanded my already big feeling of being completely alienated from the rest of the society who seemed like that they know what they are doing and who are they for and all of these things,
Mhm.
which I didn't know. So I thought there must be something wrong with me because I'm like 25, 26, and I have no idea what I want to do with my life. And I have so many ideas, and that can't possibly be okay because everyone else kind of signals that it
Yeah.
isn't, that I should pick one and stay with it because that's what adult people do.
Mm.
And for me, it's created also like it created a resistance on two levels. First of all, it was resistance towards that entire idea and notion that just because there is, just because the majority of people think that way, that means they are right and everything else is wrong.
Wrong. Yeah.
But on the same level, like subconsciously, I feel like even though I wasn't, like even though I wasn't intentionally picking their signals and then kind of embodying them, they still kind of somehow gotten under my skin, where
Mm.
I felt resistance with me being so creative and looking at it as a negative thing as opposed to a positive thing, as a curse rather than a blessing and my superpower. So it felt a lot of like I needed a lot of unlearning to literally come to peace that the way that I work and the way that my mind works is okay. That it's not weird, that it's my own unique way of being. And it
Yeah.
manifests into doing however it wants to manifest. However, I feel in the moment of contributing to the work or to the society or to whatever that sparks my passion at that moment. But kind of arriving to that stage of feeling like I am completely 100% okay with myself and how I present myself to the world. It was a long, long journey of just like stripping all of these learned label things that were kind of I always explain it as I kind of went through the like I roamed the streets of the world and people
Mm.
just were sticking like stickers on me of the things I should be or of things I should be, or of things I should do, or how I should act, or how I should dress.
Mm.
And now I'm just like kind of unpeeling those, and it's a painful process because some are peeled directly on the skin versus on the
This one's a tattoo. Oh gosh. Yeah.
yeah, those where you need to get the kind of laser tattoo removal appointments. They hurt.
Yeah.
They hurt
Honestly,
the
those
most.
laser tattoo appointments are called therapy. Trust me. It's like it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not quite like peeling off the sticker, but I 100% get where you're coming from because the minute that you realize that you don't fit into this elevator pitch way of life, and even more so as a business owner, right?
Mhm.
There's so much in business, both traditional and especially when it came online, it like hyper focused into this whole you need to be able to introduce yourself in 2 minutes and knock someone's socks off and like get a sale, whatever it may be, right? The pressure that came
Yeah.
with it. But when you live a multi hyphenate life like we do, you also have this like this shadow of the joy of deciding, do you know what? I'm going to do all the things. There's the shadow, there's the dark side of I now need to work extra hard to articulate what I do.
Hmm.
And that's why one of the things that I always say to people, if you are multi hyphenate, try and take control of that intro conversation. And instead of asking, what do you do? Ask what you're working on right now.
Mm.
That gives everybody in the room the opportunity to share what they feel like sharing without walking away going, oh my gosh, I only told them one of the five things that I did. Oh, I'm so silly. Right? I only told them one of my job titles because they glazed over after I said that one.
Yeah.
Right? It gives you that space to just define yourself for yourself. That means that you're engaging in your power. It means that you can start to sort of let go of some of the pressure of like some of the pressure of having to condense yourself. Because by definition, multi hyphenate, multi passionate, generalist is multiple. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of it. So it's that sort of situation. I remember I learned that pretty early on in my journey to the point where at the top of my CV, and it's still on there now. I think my CV might be on LinkedIn. You might be able to download it. Who knows? It's there. Email me for it if you want to see it. Like if you're multi-passionate, you're struggling with writing a traditional CV, I will send you my CV. But it says people plus process. And people are like, what does that mean? And I was just like, every career, whether it's hospitality, undergrad, working as an events manager, surveyor, property manager, now working in tech as a community manager, but I was a customer success manager before that,
Mhm.
people and process. I can organize anything and I
Yeah,
love people.
yeah,
The thread through all of it. I'm a coach, right? I coach people one to one. That's people. I
yeah.
show people how to find their way of being. That's a process. That's a curriculum that
Mhm.
I take three people through. So if you think of me and you think of those words, you could be thinking about any dimension of me. You could be thinking about 2015 Jazz. You can be thinking about 2022 Jazz. That is who I am, and that's connected to my values. And if you meet me, I'll tell you what I'm working on, and I'll cut to that why, right?
Yeah,
I'll cut to
yeah.
that mission. And it just so happens that this is how I'm living out that mission right now. This is how I'm living out my values right now. So let's
Mm,
get into that. That's the juiciness. Because I don't think anyone's ever really excited. Like, it's not very often that I meet somebody give the traditional two-sentence elevator pitch and I think, oh, we should go for coffee.
yeah,
We should talk more, right? It's usually just like, okay, that's interesting. And especially if you're in a circle, oh my gosh, the pictures just get tighter and snazzier and more abstract,
yeah.
right? To the point where when it gets to you and you're just like, I'm power people, yeah. And I like talking to people and telling stories. People are like, oh well, she very boho, very open, very modern, right? Very millennial, She thinks she doesn't need to do an elevator pitch. Okay, that's fine. And I take this with an eye of realism. What I've worked out is introducing me is always going to be me. And then
Mhm.
when it comes to articulating the value, if it is in a work context, then I will tell you what one-to-one coaching is like with me. I will tell you what workshops are like with me. I will tell you what's the point of my program.
Yeah.
That's when we can get to the detail because I understand that there's a level of making it easy for people to understand if you're the person they want to work with or
Mm.
spend more time with or the person they want to introduce to someone else. Like I get that we have to have that space within personal branding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't need to be like you aren't a brand. You are you and you have a personal brand. You're here, personal brand attached. Attached. Still stems from you, created by you, owned by you. But when I meet you, I want to meet you.
Mm. That's so powerful because I think yeah, a big part of networking and like trying to establish a connection with someone nowadays is primarily about like work related and yeah, like brand to brand conversation as opposed to human conversation
Mm.
that we should be sparking more and enjoying more. Um,
Humans create businesses. Businesses don't create humans.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what my mind was trying to.
What is it? Like humans have job roles. Job roles don't create humans.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think like any so like an n number of humans can fulfill a certain job role, but only you can fulfill your own name plus surname. Like only you can fulfill your own human being. So
Yeah.
that's why I think we need to kind of work more on even when introducing ourselves for the first time or I don't know communicating and networking. It's more about let's show people who we are and
Mm,
then how who we are manifests in what we do rather than doing the other way around.
100%.
100%. Yeah, and I love just to give a final compliment amongst many on this hour. How you kind of found, let's say, a formula of
Mm,
introducing yourself that brings for people who are multi passionate and generalists. It reclaims our own power.
mhm.
I can't remember a time where I felt good when I was introducing myself. for all of the reasons that you mentioned, and reframing it in a way that you reframed it, and kind of me getting my power back and feeling like, okay, now I'm the one kind of that writes my story, and that's thinking, or rather that has, yeah, that has the power of how my story will reach other people, and how
Mm,
it will be received, to what extent it will be received, is something that I will practice from now on, because I think that's a better way of leaving the conversation than feeling like, no, shit.
yeah. Oh, what was that? Follow me. I shouldn't have walked up to this circle of people.
Yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, and it's always more draining than I technically think that it is,
Mm,
because I always, again, like, I will always feel bad, or I will think, oh, like, she's a lost cause, like, she doesn't know what she's doing, or where she's headed, or what does she want to do. And that's
mm,
because I gave them the power and the responsibility to kind of take the conclusion out of whatever I was saying, instead of me very confidently giving to them everything that I am, and
yeah.
being like, this is it, and like, there's no room for misinterpretation.
Mm.
This is it. And yeah, I will definitely be practicing that. And I can't wait for you to publish the blog post that you just mentioned.
It's coming. I'm literally finishing it off. It's basically all the ways that imposter syndrome limits entrepreneurs specifically, like
Mm,
those moments. Yeah.
I love that. And I will encourage everyone to, and I will show it one more time on the screen, to go to your website and read all of your past blog posts and LinkedIn articles as well, or LinkedIn posts, because I loved yours from December time, and you were like talking a lot about resting and burnout and
Mm,
ways of working, which really resonated with me. So I know that for anyone who felt heard or seen in our conversation today, they will resonate with what you are writing consistently and constantly, as well.
thank you so much, Venka. This has been amazing and such a great conversation to have. I hope it helps everyone who tuned in or is watching back after.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you for being here with us today once more. I'm so thrilled that we had this conversation, and I know that it will it will help a lot of people, on so many levels. Like, I can't put it into words, how, like, even for me, how much time your words will kind of echo in my brain for the days to come, because I feel, and I think this is what great coaches do. It's like, even though we didn't tackle something, let's say, like, very directly and deeply,
Mm,
you manage to put it in such a clear way that kind of, like, just like goes around my mechanism of thinking, this is 100% how it is. And
mm.
then your words come in, kind of go around and infiltrate that feeling, and just like dissolve it.
Thank you so much.
You're
This means a
welcome.
lot. Means a lot because again, like me, I think we relate to this as people who write and express ourselves through writing. Is that um we write to get it out there, right? It's a
Yeah,
message, it's an experience that we want to share, and we just hope that it connects with just one. For it to just connect with one person, that's enough for me. I'm like, I've done my job. I have listened to this calling within me to do that, and I will always continue to share openly and vulnerably. So it means a lot to me that it has that impact on you, and that we've been able to have this conversation and be real and raw, right?
yeah,
It's important, the messy middle.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and thank you for all of your knowledge and wisdom, and for sharing everything so openly and being vulnerable with us here today. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.
Okay. Thank you, Jazz, and I hope you're having a lovely rest of the day.
You too.
Okay, thank you so much. See ya.
See ya.